Alright everybody, now that we know a little bit about 2D arrays, we are going to find out how to play tic-tac-toe. And this is going to be a kind of busted version of tic-tac-toe, because eventually we want to make it so that our client and server play tic-tac-toe, so the client's going to play the X's and the server's going to play the O's or whatever. So this is just really going to put only X's or only O's on the screen. It's trivial to make it put both, but I wanted to just kind of set you up for success. So we're only going to do one or the other. So here's the deal. We have our grid, our 2D array we talked about in our last video, and I'll just guide you through my code, and this will be uploaded to GitHub as well, so you can take a look at it. So here's the story. We got setup. I'm making it 300 by 400. I put a little extra on the height so I can show the mouse coordinates for this demonstration. My grid is going to be 3 by 3, just like tic-tac-toe. And here's some stuff just to make it a little bit prettier. Nothing important, really. So you can do that if you wish. So this is what this... here's my draw function. So I have a white background, and then I draw my lines. And this whole space is going to take place in sort of a 300 by 300 box. The bottom 100 again is made for output. I'll show you what it looks like here. I'll run it. This is what it's going to look like. So here's my lines I've drawn with the dividing lines. I'm also drawing the coordinates. So as I move my mouse around, you can sort of see what my coordinates are, because we're going to do some math with that later on to convert coordinates to a row and column. So then there's going to be all this stuff about drawing out our grid. So we need to draw our X's and O's on the screen. So this loop is meant to be very similar to the one we saw in the last video that's going to process our 2D array. So it's just going to be doing the exact type of things we were doing in the last video, except the thing that we're going to do is not print. We are going to instead draw an X or an O at particular coordinates. So that's going to be fine. And we have this function that I have written, and I'll show you in a bit how it works. And then at the bottom of my draw function, I'm just writing the coordinates. So that's basically the whole draw function. We're still missing two parts. It's like how do we draw an X and an O? Basically reading from the column and the row to find out if there's an X and O. And then that's this function here. I'll talk about it in a bit. Here's the mouse function for how do we assign an X and an O. So this is a mouse released function, and we do some math to figure out what row and column to put there. I have it working, so right now it plays, I don't know if it's O's or X's. Apparently it's X's. This just plays X's. If I switch this to a 1, it'll play O's instead. Because eventually you're going to play a client server game, and only one of you will be an X and only one of you will be an O. Server will be X and client will be O, for example. So that's why we're only putting in X's or O's in this project, not both. So let's talk first about clicking. Here we go. The mouse released is a little bit smaller, so this might be the more manageable one to talk about. So for the mouse released function, check out my fancy math. I am taking the mouse X and the mouse Y and dividing it by 100 to get the appropriate row and column. And you might think that's bananas because, for example, we talked about what is the row and column number of these different things in the last video. So for example, this is row 0, column 0, right? And this is row 1, column 0. This is over here, this is row 1, column 2. So why is dividing by 100 going to give us the row and column? For example, right over here, if you look at, I could go to like 94, 95. That is an example. If you divide that by 100, shouldn't you get 0.95 and 0.94? Not 0, 0? Well, actually, you do get 0, 0. And that's because both of these numbers are integers. This is an int and this is an int. And in Java and processing and most programming languages, if you have an int divided by an int, it doesn't give you a decimal answer. It gives you an integer answer. So it just chops off the decimals, if you will. So when I divide 42 and 53 by 100, I would normally get 0.41, 0.53, but then it chops off the decimals. So I really just get 0, 0. And you can look at any set of mouse coordinates in here, whether it's 6593 or 7728 or 1014 or 9999 or whatever. I can't quite get there because my mouse is not great. But you're gonna get 00. So I first divide both the mouse and mouse x and y by 100, and that gives me the row and column that I can store that information in. And also I'm going to check to make sure it's 0. That means it's empty. If it's empty, then I can do it. I don't want to be able to overwrite another person's play. That would kind of break tic-tac-toe. Or would it make it better? I don't know. I don't think it would make it better. Here's another example, just in case that's confusing. I'll go over here. What is the row and column of this? Don't think about the coordinates, just think about the row and column. That's row 0, 1, so row 1, and it's column 0, 1, 2. So this is row 1, column 2. So what does that tell us? So I guess you might be like, oh, X should be row and Y should be column. It actually is not that way. X tells you what column it should be. Row is given by the Y coordinate. So usually it goes X, Y. So you have to kind of reverse it. It's going to be a little bit confusing, but we'll take the mouse X, which is 258. That will tell us the column. If you divide 258 by 100 and then chop off the decimals, what do you get? You get a 2, right? Perfect. That's column 2. To find the row, we take the Y coordinate and divide it by 100. So 154 divided by 100 is 1.54. And then chop off the decimals. That gives us 1. So row 1 is given by the Y. Column 2 given by the X dividing by 100. You might wonder, wait, is it because of the number 100? Is it something special about 100? No, it's just because I have basically a 300, this 400 is extra. I have a 300 by 300 space. So I'm just saying that my grid size, if you will, is 100 by 100. I could make this bigger. I could make this 600 by 600, in which case I'd have to divide by 200 instead. So it's all relative to what your grid size is. So my grid size is 100 by 100. Okay, and then I can just assign a number in there. I'm using ones to represent, I forgot. 1 is a O apparently, and a 2 is, if I ran it with the 2's instead, I'm assigning X's. So that's the deal. So that's what's assigning the row and the column. Oh, but wait, how are we showing this stuff? That's the next step. So if you understood the mouse released, let's look over now at the drawing of the X's and O's. Here's the loop that's doing it every frame. So basically I start at row 0 and column 0. And I'm just going to use this loop like we saw in the last video to go through every cell, starting with the first row and going down each column, and then the row number 1, and then down each row and column, and row number 2, and then down each column. And then here I am going to do the actual drawing of the X and O. So just like the mouse coordinates, we have to divide by 100 to convert to the row and column. For this function here, we're going to have to multiply it by 100 to convert back to X and Y coordinates so that we know where to draw the X and O. So I'll show you what that looks like. We're going to go down now to draw XOs. So this is going to involve some push and pop matrix stuff going on here because I want to be translating. So translating is going to be essentially what allows us to move our X or our O into the right place when we draw it. So first of all, the draw XO function gets sent a row and a column. So when this is 0, 0, row and column in this function will be 0 and 0. When this is 2, 2, then down here the row and column will get 2 and 2. So this will be 2, 2. So that's what's going on. That's the idea. So what I'm going to do is basically translate to get myself to the right square. So if I'm at 0, 0, that's going to translate me to, hey, 0, 0. It won't put me anywhere. But if I was at 2, 2, this would translate me to 200, 200. And then I just check to see if, hey, what's actually in the grid of that row and column? Is it a 1? Well, then I'll draw an ellipse because it's an O. Is it a 2? Well, then I'll draw an X, which is just 2 lines being drawn. And I can use these coordinates just like hard-coded because I'm translating. And I just happen to pick these coordinates to represent an X or an O that fits nicely into it. So basically, I'm converting back to mouse X, mouse Y coordinates. or just X and Y coordinates really to draw these things on the screen. So there you go. That's a basic tic-tac-toe game that has no networking whatsoever, but it is ready to be added in networking, because what I'd like to do is make 2 of these coming up. So in the next video, what you're going to see me do is I'm going to take this and copy it into 2 separate programs, a client and a server, and then we'll add in the sending and listening code so that we can send the click information from one side of it, like from the client, for example, to the server, and then from the server to the client. All right, thanks everybody. I hope that was clear, and I'll have this uploaded to GitHub as well, so you can download the code in case you're having troubles and just compare it and see what's happening. Thanks so much.